We're so glad that you're joining us for the online experience today. My name's Megan Rossman and I'm on staff here at Fellowship. Pastor Joe is going to be kicking off our new series today called Stand Out with a great message on unity. Stick around to the end. I've just got a couple quick announcements for you. Check this out.
Morning, everybody. Having a good day so far? Aren't you guys impressed how fast we can get this set up? Like it's a really nerve-wracking process when you have 30 seconds to get this all put back into place, but these guys did a great job, so thank you so much. If you're visiting with us, I want to extend a special welcome to you. If you're here in the building or if you're online, we're just glad that we can come together as a church and spend this time in worshiping God, looking at His Word. Like Aaron said, we are beginning a series that I believe to be one of the most important series for the church today. Not just our church, but the church across America. It's an important series we've called Stand Out. It's especially important right now, coming through this very crazy, highly divisive season that we're in right now with the election and all of that. And it's a great series to go through 1 Corinthians. Well, I was thinking this week, so I grew up in the 80s. Raise your hand if you're a child of the 80s. Few of us are out there. Okay, child of the 80s. Over the last couple months, my wife and I have been watching different shows, different movies with my kids, my little ones, and I found it to be very difficult as we're watching some of these shows that take place in the 80s to explain to my kids why we believed it to be a good idea to dress the way that we did in the 80s. Right? Here, check us out. This was cool, right? So I don't know, I would try to explain why and all of that. I don't quite, it's a hard thing to do if you've ever done it. I vividly remember 1987, I was in 4th grade, and I was in Miss Kuzma's class. Okay, I always remember Miss Kuzma. She was a great teacher. And I remember as we go into that school year, I had one request. This is all I wanted going into the school year, which I did not get at the beginning of the school year. I wanted this right here. Let's go, this right here. Chuck Taylor All-Stars, Canvas All-Stars. This is what I wanted to wear, right? I wanted to have this. These were cool. My friends were wearing them. Michael Jackson wore them. Everybody around wore these things, and this is what I needed to be wearing as well. And so naturally, I went into school not wearing them. And so when it came Christmas time, I'm just, asking my mom and dad again, just give me these Chuck Taylor All-Stars. Just give me Chuck Taylor All-Stars. Which is, ironically enough, the same shoes my dad wore at my age. And now my kids, they're wearing the same shoes now. It's just amazing how fads and trends go like this. But that Christmas, I get it. And I get my Chuck Taylor All-Stars. And then all of a sudden, I hit that panic mode when we were about to go back to school in January, and I start to lace them up. And if you wore them, you know what it is. I'm like, do I lace them all the way up? Do I lace them part way up and roll them down? Because you're supposed to roll them down. Those are cool things to do, too. And then I finally figured out what I was going to do, and then I got to peg my pants. You ever did that? It's hard. And do you peg your pants? Is that still cool? Is it not cool? And I figured I went ahead and pegged my pants, and so I tied them up, rolled them down, pegged the pants, and I made it my way into school. As I'm walking into school, finally being cool, just like everyone else. As I'm walking in, I go into Miss Kuzma's class, and I found out how cool I am because I'm the only one there with black Chuck Taylor All-Stars. Because they're no longer cool. And Miss Kuzma's class let me know quickly that they are no longer cool. Yeah, that's my daughters. I told my daughters the story, and Geneva, my second, she starts to cry for me. She feels bad. I'm like, honey, this is just yet one more reason why, even to this day, I still do not even make an attempt to be cool, right? It's just safer that way, to not stand out and to be cool like that, right? Well, here's the thing. Jesus followers of Christ, were never meant to blend in. Right? We were never meant, this is not talking about shoes here, right? But we were never meant to blend in. We were always meant to stand out. The Christ-centered life always stands out in society. It's just the way that it was designed. The next 4 weeks, like Aaron said, we're going to be covering these 4 characteristics that cause the Christian life to stand out no matter where you are. Unity, purity, freedom, and love. They're all aspects of the Christ life that naturally goes countercultural to what our society says. Because see, the truth is, not all of us want to stand out. Not everybody has that internal desire to stand out and to be on the forefront. We're all fans. We all are fans of unity, purity, freedom, and love. We're excited about that. We like that. But when it comes to following through in our everyday life, it's a different story. And so we're asking the question throughout this series, we're asking the question, am I a fan or a follower of Jesus? Am I a fan or a follower of Jesus? Because Jesus had all kinds of fans, all kinds of people who gathered around him. Jesus had the poor, or the purr, if you were Jonathan Morton, right? Come on, that Irish accent. Anybody have a hard time? Yeah, the purr. No, the poor. We had the poor. Jesus had the poor who followed him wherever he went. Jesus had the rich who were fans. Jesus had the non-religious people who were fans. Jesus even had some of the stiff-necked religious Pharisees who were fans from time to time. See, they were fans, but they were fans as long as he gave them answers, as long as he gave them encouragement, as long as sometimes he just gave them a meal. But interestingly enough, these fans, they kind of were on a sliding scale. There were certain moments when they were really a big fan of Jesus. Other moments when Jesus wasn't quite as popular, they were down the scale here a little bit. And not nearly as big of a fans. And depending on what was going on in the life and society and his popularity, they were bigger fans or not as much. But the followers of Jesus, his disciples, is a total different story. They went beyond being a fan because they said that they wanted to take their life. They weren't just fans, they followed him. They wanted their lives to begin to look more and more and more like him. That's what a follower of Jesus does. To say it plainly, it's easy to be a fan, but it's not always easy to be a follower of Jesus. Even Jesus said this, Matthew 16:24, he says, if any man wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. It's not easy to be a follower of Jesus, because to follow Jesus is to choose to stand out in our society. To stand out and to look different. Now, in our society today, it's both difficult when we stand out as well as very, very easy to stand out. It's difficult to stand out when you want to choose the right thing. When you're the only person there who's making the choice that goes against culture, it becomes difficult. You're under the magnifying glass, the microscope. People are looking into your lives, and it becomes difficult and pressures come on. It's also super easy to stand out in society if you want to do what we talked about even earlier this year, which is just to play the fool. There's plenty of people out there with foolishness right now going on, isn't there? Honestly, I've been amazed when you check out social media and Facebook, the things that people would post and that they would say with as if they weren't totally even considering what other people would think, let alone what Christ would think in that moment. It's been going on for years. This has always been like this, where people badmouth, gossip, slander. Nowadays, it's called a little different. Nowadays, they call it your entitled opinion as you post those out. Back in my day when I was growing up, back in 1987, our pastor had a different word for it in church. It was called disunity. It was called sin. Let's see what Paul has to say about this. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Turn your Bibles with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 10 here. Here's what it says. I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, that there be no divisions among you, that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. Brothers and sisters, some from Chloe's household have informed me that there are quarrels among you. mean is this. One of you say, I follow Paul. Another, I follow Apollos. Another, I follow Cephas. Another says, I follow Christ. He's saying, you guys have all chosen up your sides. Verse 13, is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized in the name of Paul? I thank God that I did not baptize any of you except for Crispus and Gaius, and so that none of you can say that you were baptized in my name. Yes, I also baptized the household of Stephanas, but beyond that, I don't remember if I baptized anyone else. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not by wisdom and eloquence, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of his power. Now, as we start off this series, I want to give a quick background to this church in Corinth, because the Apostle Paul sits down and he's writing this letter to a church, to a group of people who live in the city of Corinth. And here's what it is. Let me get this map up here. We've got this, the city of Corinth right here is in between these two gulfs. You've got the Gulf of Corinth and the Saronic Gulf. And what happened is this. As ships would come in through this section right here, they're coming in full of cargo and everything. As they move up to this little piece of land in between, in order to continue on, they had to unload all of the goods, all of the wealth, all of the things off the ship, literally carry it across this little strip of land, put it onto another ship. It was said that if some of these ships were actually small enough, they would actually pick the whole ship up and just carry it across. And so that one way or another, basically everything of value at one point or another would go through this city of Corinth. At some point, all of the wealth, all of the trades, all of the goods would go. So it was an important city, a strategic location right there. As a result, you have people from up in here who were the Greeks. They had settled in there. The Romans had settled there. You've got people from the Orient who'd settled there. You've got people from all around the regions who are all gathered together. The Jews had built a synagogue right there. Everybody was together in that one location. The importance of it was comparable to like a New York City or a London or Paris or one of these others. Leon Morris, a New Testament scholar, describes the importance of the city as this. He says, they were intellectually alert, they were materially prosperous, and they were extremely morally corrupt. And this church was birthed right there. And so all this corruption, all of this sin kept creeping back into the church. And we're going to see this throughout this series, where these issues that were prevalent in our culture was now just as prevalent within the church as it is outside of the church. And Paul's saying we got to do something about this. Things like, for example, sexual immorality and idolatry were just rampant, even in the church. The church, the culture actually saw sexual immorality, being promiscuous and such, as being a virtue that you can carry with you. And don't worry about it. We're going to cover that next week on purity. So you've got that to look forward to. It's going to be a great time. Idolatry was everywhere. Believe it or not, it's hard to imagine, but this culture was such that it was a common place for people to live all of their lives in the pursuit of things. It was a transient community. Like I said, there's people coming and going. And so as all of these cultures came together in this melting pot, what you would have is you'd have this group of people who would come together, and their leader would be one of the best leaders. And this group of people said that their leader was the best. And this group of people would follow behind this leader because this leader was the best. And it says that, Paul says that all of these little divisions that happen in the culture, they're now in the church. And even the church is dividing up between here and here and here. Now let's think if we can think of any place that sounds like. Is there any place where we would choose up behind the people, where we put signs in our yards, where we would do all these things up and down 306? And Paul says, this is where we are. This is the atmosphere that Paul is speaking to, which is why this is important for the church. Our church and the church in America today. So how does he start a letter? If you're going to write the church, that's all of this sin is rampant throughout. They're living in this culture. How do you start this letter? Well, your first opening sentence, your opening paragraph is going to set the tone for the entire letter that he's writing here. And what does he say is the most important? He says, I appeal to you that you all agree with one another, that there be no divisions among you. He says, no divisions, same mind, same thought, or same judgment. He says there's going to be 1,000 reasons why you would want to divide, 1,000 reasons why that's going to be pulling you into separations within the church. 1,000, but don't fall into that trap. Don't allow yourself to fall into that trap, because despite all of your diversity, you must find unity. Unity is essential to God's people at all times. Of all the things that Paul could address, he addressed unity right out of the gates, first and foremost. So why is unity so important in the church? Is it because God doesn't like fighting? God doesn't like when people can't agree on a particular theological issue, political candidate, or a public policy? Is that why God? It's much, much, much deeper than that. The call for unity is much more important than the risk of hurt feelings or frustrating conversations. He says that there be no division among you. Verse 17, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. Lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. See, that's what's at stake when we don't follow God's call to be unified. When we don't follow God's call to be unified. We place Christ under the shadow of each of our attitudes, opinions, and actions. We take the cause of Christ and we put it under us. Unity isn't necessary for a fan of Christ, but for a follower of Christ, it's essential. Let me show you how this plays out in these 3 specific areas of our lives each and every day. Unity means Christ is above our attitudes, our opinions, and our actions. Your attitude matters. By definition, your attitude is a settled way of thinking. It's the heart approach to an issue. Your attitude is how you enter into the conversation. What's the posture of your heart as you enter the conversation? Now, we know a lot about attitudes here in Cleveland, right? I've been living here now for about 9 years, and I come to learn at the beginning of football season each and every year, you've got 2 primary attitudes of the fans of Cleveland Browns, right? You've got the optimists and the pessimists. You know which one you are. The optimist sees it as 0-0, we're undefeated, right? Things are going great, this is the year. It's going to be the turnaround year. Right? The pessimist is, it's 0-0. We haven't been beaten yet, but it's coming. And my Browns are going to disappoint us. See, I've come to learn over the last 9 years, kind of the approach in which you take, the attitude of your heart reveals the level of love that you have in there. We see this in the church all the time. We approach situations where we say we've got truth in love when actually we just want to get a point across instead. And that's the attitude of our heart. The facts may be there. We may even be in the right in our opinion, but the way in which we approach it, our attitude, it really isn't this attitude of love. And in that moment, as we're trying to prove our point, it doesn't really matter what we're trying to say because people only see your heart in that moment. And it negates what you want to say at that point. It's kind of like when we have our kids. I know we've had it with our kids when one child's wronged the other and you say, now you need to go say you're sorry. Right? It's one thing to say you're sorry, another thing to mean it when you're sorry. That's the attitude. It's our kids, but we do it all the time. We see it all the time in our own lives. When we confront sin that particularly bothers us in that moment, and again, we enter into it not from a place of a broken heart or a place of a love for them that Christ has placed into us, but more of a place of judgment. Have you ever found yourself arguing with your spouse or your coworker really just to win the argument? Have you ever found yourself or wished that the other person would just get what they deserve because they beat you in an argument, because they've shut you down in one way or another? Have you found yourself arguing in your head with the person again, not with them, but in your head, again and again and again, just so that you can feel good and justified about your opinion and your attitude behind why you were so upset? It's our attitudes. See, the seriousness of this is that when the posture of your heart doesn't line up with Jesus, you place Christ under the shadow of your attitude. Let me say it again. When the posture of your heart doesn't line up with Jesus, you place Jesus under the shadow of your attitude. The love of Christ, his heart, the hope that he has to offer, all of it gets overshadowed by you and your attitude. Unity means Christ is above my attitude. Unity, first and foremost, is Christ is above my attitude. It isn't essential for a fan, but for a follower of Jesus, it's essential. Secondly, your opinions matter. Your opinions do matter. By definition, your opinion is the judgment that you formed of this situation or a circumstance, or your opinion. It's when you take all the discernment, you've taken all the facts, you lay them all out, and then it forms an opinion in your mind. And these opinions matter. Some people keep opinions to themselves, and some people throw their opinions out and hope that somebody cares about it. Your opinions matter because they show people what you think. We live in a culture that promotes, that loves and celebrates the expressing of our opinions in all circumstances. Dialogue on social media becomes nothing less than my opinion on your opinion about something that you've stated. And we know that most of the time these expressions are filled with passive-aggressive attacks, with hurtful sayings, and certainly causing disunity. Now, I'm not saying that you don't ever voice your opinion, because we're also called to do that as followers of Christ, to be able to voice our opinions, but not at the expense of Jesus. Not at the expense of Jesus. It's far too easy for us to place the importance of us expressing our opinions over the importance or above the importance of us expressing Jesus. Have you ever done it? Imagine if Jesus sat down with you today and he started going through all of your conversations over the last couple weeks. Face-to-face conversations that you've had, behind closed doors conversations that you've had, comments that you've placed on Facebook and social media, all of it. If Jesus sat down and went through each one of these things and says, does this point to me? Does this honor me? Does this show people who I am? Because I got to tell you, if what you're saying isn't honoring to the other person, it's not going to be honoring to Jesus. Your opinion, even if you're right, expressed the wrong way, causes disunity. Anytime you offer an opinion and people can't see Jesus in it, if they can't see Jesus in it because of how you've said it, then you take Jesus and you take your opinion and you've placed Jesus under the shadow of your opinions. For a fan, Jesus is one of many things that we like. But for a follower of Jesus, we place everything that we have under him. Unity means Christ above my opinions. When you've placed the need to get your opinion above the need for Jesus, you find yourself in trouble. Because the power of the cross, the sacrifice, the forgiveness, all the grace that has happened gets covered up by you. Finally, your actions matter. Your actions and your behavior are the teeth to your convictions. And so your actions matter. How you act matters. It's so important because we can say we believe something, we can say that this matters and this matters, but it's your actions that actually prove if they do matter to you. But if our actions actually do speak louder than our words, then anytime we put our actions above Jesus, when we put our actions on center stage instead of Jesus on center stage, then the conversations that we have puts Christ under the shadow of our actions. See, for the follower of Christ, our actions, Christ is always above our actions. They can never be above expressing Christ. When your actions don't line up with God's word, when your actions don't line up what God's called us to, when your actions don't line up what you've been called to say and do as a follower of Christ, then your actions will always speak louder than your words. And people will see your actions far above Christ. Regardless of how you feel in the moment, no matter how justified you feel in that moment, you always have to place your actions under Christ. Getting upset, shouting, slamming your hands down, walking out, posting mean things like that. Does it reflect Christ? We live in a society where we've mostly all grown up, where the end justifies the means society. But does it? Isn't it the journey on that? Isn't that where people see Jesus in us? Don't people see Jesus in us on the whole journey there to the end? Let's get practical. Do you act differently today than you did on Monday? Do you feel differently in your heart today than you do on Monday? Jesus has to be first. Why? Because that's where we find unity. In a very diverse culture, diverse opinions, diverse attitudes, in all of the diversity, we find unity in Jesus. It says there be no divisions among you, lest the cross of Christ be emptied. Nobody here wants to take away from the power of the cross, I believe. I'm guessing there isn't a follower of Jesus here that doesn't want to go in a conversation with somebody and push them away from the power of what Jesus did on the cross. But that is what we do when we allow disunity into the church, Paul is saying. When that becomes reflective of what it looks like within the church, he says, you take the power of Jesus, of forgiveness, and you push people away from that. See, unity is found in the power of the cross. It's found in what Jesus did there on the cross. That no matter who you are, where you're from, rich, poor, Republican, Democrat, Baptist, Catholic, whether you're running into the arms of Jesus or whether you are running away from Jesus, regardless of all of those things, Jesus still made the choice to die for you and to run after you. Jesus chose to go to the cross for you. Unity is found in the cross. It says we've all fallen short. We all continue to fall short time after time after time. God takes his perfect standard and he says that you don't measure up to it. Our sin and our mistakes have separated us from a relationship of God, and Jesus came to pay the debt that you and I could not pay, regardless of your background. He died an unfair and unjust death that we deserved. But that's God's grace poured out for us. And it's in that grace where we find unity. Your attitude matters, but keep Christ above your attitude. Your opinions matter, but you have to keep Christ above your opinions. Your actions matter, but you have to, at all times, in all circumstances, keep Christ above your actions. Christ needs to be shown above all, in all of my life. So the question for us is simple. Do we need to move from being a fan to being a follower? Do you need to move from being a fan to a follower? Have you found Jesus has been easy to follow as long as you stay at a safe distance? right? Do you find yourself, do you sit on a sliding scale with your relationship with Jesus where sometimes you're really close to him? And it's really easy and great when we're together and we're spending time together with him in here, and we're with our friends who think like that. But as soon as we walk out of the doors and it gets a little bit more difficult to live this in each day, and do you slowly slide over this way and Jesus become less of a fan and less of a fan? Now, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the church. Whether this is your first day or you've been here since you were a child, you can still find yourself as a fan of Jesus. You consider yourself to be a follower of Jesus. Are you carrying the characteristic of unity with you wherever you go? Do you carry this belief, this desire to be unified because of what Christ did for us? Christ needs to be above all in all of your life. Unity does not come easy. It's not natural. You have to strive to be unified. This is why Paul addresses this. He says, you have to root this out. You've got to go for this because the cross of Christ is at stake here. Your testimony, what people know of Jesus, is at stake here. So we need to remember that no matter what happens in society, no matter what happens in our community, no matter what happens in our country, God is firmly planted on the throne. We have a connection with him because of what Christ did on the cross. And because of that, our lives, our hopes, our future, all of these things are firmly secure in his hands. Through the ups and the downs and the twists and the turns of society, ups and the downs and the twists and turns of our culture, God still sits right there. He's still in control. Christ still died for you and for me. We need to find unity in that. Let's pray together. God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for the challenge that Paul gave to these people years ago about issues that are going on in their culture and in their time that just sit well with where we are now. God, help our hearts to be unified together because of who you are, because of your forgiveness, because of your love for us. Help us despite diversity, despite disagreement, despite all the things that could pull us apart and cause us to be disunified. God, despite all of that, help us not fall into that trap. God, I pray that as people see our lives Monday through Saturday, not just on Sundays, as people see our lives throughout our week, they see people who are running after you, who regardless of circumstances, regardless of what's going on in our lives, stand firm in the promises that you're over all of it. And we run desperately for you. God, I pray for those who here today are fans, and you've been pulling at their hearts, challenging them and pushing them to be a follower of Christ. God, I pray that today is a day of surrender, a day in which we give up. We say, we can't do it, God, so I give this to you. God, we give you all these things. We give you the next 4 weeks as we look into your word. Convict us, teach us, lead us as a church to be fully devoted followers of Christ. God, I pray all of these things in your son's name. Amen. Well, fellowship, I hope you have an amazing week. Make sure you get back here next week as we dive into this topic of purity here. Read through 1 Corinthians if you'd like to this week. Give you a good heads up of what's to come. See you guys next week. Love you.
Wasn't that an an awesome message on unity? For me, something that's so important is just meeting people where they are and loving them for who they are when it comes to being unified with others. If this was your first time joining us, head on over to our website where you can partner with us in your giving, find out more information about the church and all of our upcoming events. We'll see you next week. Pastor Aaron is going to be up with week 2 of Stand Out. Have a great week.